Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. So the work I present now is a paper in preparation with the colleagues that are mentioned in the bottom part of the screen. So some of my old friends in geodynamic studies like Thorsten Becker and Claudio Faccenna, Alexander Koptev, and now also Anne Davai and Barbara Romanovitz, and a number of people from our lab, Nicolas Bellassin and others. So the idea is to start with to try to understand the European Cenozoic rift system. What are the geodynamic causes of this short rifting event, starting sometime in the late Eocene and running during the Oligocene. So it's short, and it didn't lead to a major extensional phase. It's a slow extension during a short time. So there were various rifting models proposed on this prominent feature of Western Europe. So involving either just the alpine slab pool here, paper by Merle, Michon, and others, plumes, one or several plumes, papers by Piromallo and others, for instance, or a combination of slab pool and plumes, for instance, the papers by Ziegler and Des in 2007. And you notice on this map that the rift is, and it is well known, associated especially with volcanic edifices. And these volcanic systems, they belong to the Euro-Mediterranean volcanic province, an alkaline volcanic province. So when one speaks about the European rift system, one should be careful not to mix it up with the back arc extension. So you see here two reconstructions, one in the Pre-Arbonian some 35 million years ago, and one in the Burdigalian some 18 million years ago. And the second one shows mostly back arc extension, which is the typical Mediterranean geodynamics, and as we know it. But the rift itself occurred just before that back arc extension, and somehow between the end of the Pyrenean compression and the beginning of the back arc extension with some slight overlap. Then on this rather busy diagram here, you have the ages, the horizontal axis. You see that on the lower part of the diagram, one can divide the geodynamic history of that region between three main periods. What I call the Tetian period, that's before 35 MA, where you built most of the mountain belts there. And then a typical Mediterranean period that is characterized by slab retreat and back arc extension. And then after, say, 8 million years, what I call the late Mediterranean period, where, especially in the western part of the system, one goes back to, returns to some north-south compression, especially across the Strait of Gibraltar and the Alboran Sea. The European rifting period takes place just at the end of the Tetian period and just before the Mediterranean period. This short event, and you see the magmatism, the volcanism, is mostly before and after the rifting period. So the main extensional event is amagmatic. Yet we see, if we look at the broader picture, that the Euro-Mediterranean alkaline magmatism is distributed over a vast region almost permanently since approximately 70 million years. Okay. So we have the association of this long-lasting volcanic province and this short rift in the late Eocene and the Oligocene. So if we now enlarge the picture and look at a comparison between the East African rift and the West European rift system, we see that we have several rifts and associated with magmatic provinces that are oriented either north-south or northeast, southwest here. So there seems to be a connection, similarity between the West European rift system and the East African rift, and we try to look at these similarities and the differences. So one of the important observations is that these magmatic provinces and the rift associated with them are parallel to positive anomalies of residual topographies here. Here you have the residual topography after the paper, the model of Bernard Steinberger and others. And you see that it's very clear for the East African rift. It's quite clear for Western Europe, and it's also quite clear for the Cameroon line and the Benue rift in the middle. Then what is interesting too is that these magmatic provinces and the residual anomaly, topography anomaly, they are also parallel to the absolute motion of Africa and Eurasia. And for below Africa, we also have, and we come back to that later, parallel to the main direction of the seismic anisotropy, especially here SKS anisotropy, that is parallel to these anomaly of residual topography and to the absolute motion. So this suggests, and has suggested to us, that the East African rift is carried by this low velocity anomaly related with the FR plume, and that the propagation of this anomaly toward the north, indicated by the propagation of magmatism from south to north between 35 MA to 10 MA or something, suggests that the African lithosphere is carried northward by the plume-related mantle flow underneath, and that it's because we have this mantle flow underneath toward the north that Arabia is separated from the main body of Africa sometimes in the late Eocene. Then if we look still at the larger picture, we see that the African and European lithosphere on the left panel here, that's the S-wave tomography by Scheffer and Lebedev at 200 kilometers. We see that the African and European lithosphere, they are deeply corrugated by hotspot-related mantle flow. That is parallel to the absolute motion as we saw just before. If we go back to the late Cretaceous, that's the you see the trajectories here, and the white dots relate to show the trajectory back to the late Cretaceous here. You see that the hotspot that we see now below Europe, Western Europe, they were sitting on top of low velocity in the lower mantles, in the lower mantle, some at 1,000 kilometers. Some 70 or 80 million years ago. Now, if we look at the structure of the mantle, and this is the S-wave model from French and others in 2013 and republished recently by Davai and Romanovich in 2020, we see that the mantle convection is organized with fingers pointing in the direction of absolute motion of Africa and Eurasia, and you see these fingers here below it's very clear below the East African rift, and we have several levels of these fingers, and we also have some below West Africa. So we have the association of these fingers, the direction of the given by the SKS anisotropy, it suggested a flow northward. The anomaly of residual and topography, the magmatism and the rift also on the same vertical here, that suggests a link between these fingers and the rifting opening here. So this is a very highly simplified view of these low velocity fingers in the mantle here, compared to the absolute motion of plates in green here, the position of the East African rift here, and the main subduction zones in the north here. So we can assume, and this is a hypothesis, that the East African rift and the European rift system formed about such low density anomalies in the flowing mantle that are parallel to the absolute motion of Africa and Eurasia.
Laurent, you're at 10 minutes now.
Yep. Okay. So we propose that these rifts, not all rifts, of course, but the East African rift and the West European rift system may result from extension above these low velocity fingers, maybe due to a gradient of gravitational potential energy, so leading to an extension perpendicular to the topographic anomaly created by these fingers here, or could be also some sort of extra dose cracks on top of these low velocity anomaly, but I sort of prefer the first hypothesis here. So we have chosen to name these rifts A-type rift. I could answer questions to why A-type. So these rifts that are parallel to the absolute motion and related to these fingers, I would name them A-type rift, as opposed to B-type rift, that would be highly oblique or perpendicular to the main mantle flow underneath. So there are similarities between the East African rift and the West European rift system, but there are also differences. And one of these differences, the main one, according to me, is the orientation of the SKS anomaly. That is velocity anomaly, that is an isotropy, sorry, that is almost east-west below the Western Mediterranean and not parallel to the rift here. This anisotropy is mostly due to slab retreat that is more recent than the rift. So we have in the east here this velocity anisotropy that is parallel to the rift. We have it also below the Benue rift and the Cameroon line, but in the north here it is perpendicular. So why is that so if our hypothesis holds? The idea is that we have before 35 MA or say before 30 MA, something like that, we have this low velocity finger, similar to the one we see below the East African rift here, that was responsible for the opening of this rift here, slow opening of the rift, and that because of, and so you see it on the top here, and that because of slab retreat, the plume material was dispersed by back-arc rifting and by the astenospheric flow that is related to slab retreat, and that is much faster than the absolute motion and probably the mantle flow in that region. So slab retreat has diverted the mantle flow from the back-arc region during the post-rift period, and this is the typical Mediterranean stage. And possibly the recent period after 8 MA has seen a restoration of the pre-Mediterranean situation. And that's it, I think. Yes, thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Laurent. There's time for a few questions. If you have one, just type it in the chat or just a Q in the chat, and then you will get the word. I would kick things off. I was wondering about your argument with the GPE. So if you have active rifting that are active rifts that are uplifted by plumes and that then slide down this hill. For East Africa, this is kind of evident now. We still have high topography in East Africa and the rift is still ongoing. Is there any evidence for past high topography for the ECRIS?
For the ECRIS, the West European rift system, there are evidence of, we don't really have evidence of high topography because it's a long time ago, but we have evidence for exhumation with low temperature thermal chronology that suggests over a wide area in Western Europe of evidence for exhumation and thus probably high topography that was in the Cretaceous. but it's not entirely clear, not as clear as I would like it to be. So this is a true question.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Tahiri, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of my question is the interpretation of the SKS splitting measurements. So in the East African rift system, you have shown that you can potentially associate the northward or rift parallel SKS splitting with maybe in the crust or so due to the cracks, but you can also explain it with a northward mantle flow. So I was wondering, like, which one is your preferred model? You may have said it, but maybe I didn't catch it.
So my favorite model, but it's more a guess than anything else, because we know that the East African rift is, well, there are several papers claiming that the gravitational potential energy gradient alone can explain the although this is debated, the East African rift. This is the model I prefer, but and this would also have a consequence that this type of rift would not lead to the formation of a wide ocean of the rift. Okay, and if you look at the triple junction there, only the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden that are highly oblique on the absolute motion and oblique on the postulated low velocity finger there, only these have oceanic crust now, while the East African rift is only very slow extension, and there is no sign anywhere of an evolution toward oceanic crust. And this is the same in the West European rift system that didn't last very long, and the velocity of extension has probably been very slow. So yes, I don't know whether I answered the question, but
Yeah, you answered my question. I wish you could stay with the talk, because I'm gonna talk about the forces in more details.
okay. I try to stay a bit more, because I hear the applause on the other side of my door here, so it's not easy. There's this celebration. So okay, I try to hear the beginning of your talk.
One last question by Bernhard.
Yes, I was wondering from Fran's last figure. So you imagine that the plume material is flowing in sideways, maybe from another plume, Canaries or so, and it's not a plume that's coming up straight under Middle Europe. Is that what you call plume material?
Yeah, I have no precise idea. It's just because we see presently the volcanic islands west of Africa and west of Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have this line across the Atlas Mountain and so on, and the Laurent Sea that I drew two different fingers, but this is just speculation. Could be a big one. I have no precise idea.
Yeah, okay. And is there also rifting in Spain, or does it just begin in France and then into Germany?
It is France and Germany mainly, but there is also along the eastern coast of Spain, and then it's all mixed up with the late orogenic extension in the Alboran region. So it's difficult to see really. So
okay.